My name is Amanda Abdulhadi, and I'm part of the adult learning team here at TIFF by Lightbox. It's my distinct pleasure to welcome you to our very, very special event, Anthony Oliveira on the Blue Angel on 35mm. Pause for applause. Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge where tonight's event is taking place. We're on the treaty territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Huron-Wendat, and Anishinaabe. We are so grateful to have the opportunity to support First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities by showing the works of Indigenous filmmakers here at TIFF. So for instance, we are currently showing Nipa Wistamosawin, We Will Stand Up. Director and educator Tasha Hubbard offers a personal reflection on the death of a young Cree man, Colton Bushey, and the trial and acquittal of the man who shot him. We really, really hope you can join us and see this really remarkable film on the big screen. It's playing all this week as a new release. On behalf of TIFF, I would also like to thank our lead sponsor, Bell, our major sponsors, RBC, L'Oreal Paris, and Visa, and TIFF Cinematheque's public supporters, Ontario Creates, the Canada Council for the Arts, and of course, a big thank you to Classical FM and Zoomer Radio, our program sponsors. A special shout out also to our community partner for this event, Pride Toronto. And a really, really, really big thank you to donors and members like you for supporting TIFF's charitable mission to transform the way people see the world through film. So all summer long, you can experience TIFF Cinematheque screenings accompanied by things like this: extended intros by special guests, speakers from the film community and abroad. Next up, we have Anna Fitzpatrick on Godard's Une Femme est une Femme. The Toronto-based writer is going to analyze the agency and on-screen representation of the very, very complicated women in Godard's films of the 60s. But tonight's event is part of the series, I love this title, Insolent Enigma, Arrogant Auteur, Marlene Dietrich and Josef von Sternberg. Following their canonical first collaboration on The Blue Angel, which we're about to see, this legendary pair brought lavish European style to Hollywood landmark films, Morocco and Shanghai Express. You can watch these screenings all summer long till August 26th, and you can get tickets online at tiff.net or our box office. So thank you for bearing with me through that. On to our very, very special guest. Anthony Oliveira is a writer and cultural critic. He is the programmer of the Dumpster Raccoon Cinema film series at the Revue Cinema, which screens trashy cult classics accompanied by live performances. And he is a self-described turbo-gay dumpster raccoon on Twitter, where you can find him at meakoopa, entertaining his 70,000 followers, some of whom are here tonight, I think. He is a recurring guest on CBC's The National Pop Panel. His articles have appeared in The Washington Post, Hazlitt, Xtra, Torontoist, and others. And he has forthcoming comic book work for Dark Horse, Cartoon Network's Steven Universe, and this is very exciting, My Drag Brunch with Loki for Marvel Comics. He holds a PhD from the University of Toronto. Please join me in welcoming Anthony.
Hi, everybody. If I stand behind the podium, no one will know I'm wearing jeans. And if I don't tell you, you won't know that this bow tie is actually a hair clip from Claire's Boutique. I just want to start with this. Want to buy some illusions, slightly used, almost new. Such romantic illusions, and they're all about you. I'll sell them all for a penny. They make pretty souvenirs. Take my lovely illusions, some for loss, some for two. So this is Sasha Velour, the winner of one of the seasons of RuPaul's Drag Race, doing her Marlene Dietrich impression. This is before she was on the show. She later won, largely because of, arguably, her imitation of Marlene Dietrich on the show. And I just want to spend a little time with you thinking about why we should care about Marlene Dietrich, what work she does. This is all I really do as a thinker, is like, what is the use of this cultural icon anymore? When Amanda asked me to do this talk, I pointed out I don't know anything about Marlene Dietrich, and she said, "Oh, that's fine." And I wondered, why then have me? And then in the course of rewatching the film, I realized she's making fun of me because I don't know if you've seen the film, but I have the exact same biography as the bumbling professor in the film. I also used to teach English until I fell into the entertainment business. So I feel like this is like a very long, subtle read of my entire career. But that career does kind of impinge on the reading I'm going to give you. So I just want to show you what kind of work I do. So one of the things I do is I work for the Glad Day Bookshop as their social media. Glad Day is the oldest surviving LGBT bookstore in the world. And recently, in the middle of a financial crisis, it radically refit, it changed locations, and became kind of a cultural hub for the queer community. I took all of these. I'm very proud of them. We do cabaret acts, we do book launches, but we also do drag performances. And one of the kinds of drag performances we do are drag king performances. This is the House of Kings, one of the local groups who work largely in drag performances that are, the phrase they use is mask of center. And I just want to think about how this has anything to do with Dietrich, how these acts are sort of the children of Marlene Dietrich. So how is that true? Well, one thing that is definitely not true is that Marlene Dietrich did not invent drag king culture. One of the earlier versions of it, I mean, you can go back as far as you want, but for example, Annie Hindle was a drag performer during the American Civil War who dressed as a troupe and would perform songs at music halls. Vesta Tilley is another. Miss Hetty King. Hetty King has my favorite title for a single I've ever heard. I'm Afraid to Come Home in the Dark. It's sort of this strange, what gender are you getting? Ooh, not sure. This is some more of Vesta Tilley's performance. Drag king performances had a resurgence during the Harlem Renaissance. Here are two of the most notable. Gladys Bentley, sort of infamous on the scene. She famously performed with a backup dance of 40 drag queens. Later went on to marry her partner, a woman, and Josephine Baker. Josephine Baker deserves a talk all on her own. She grew up very poor in St. Louis, ran away to Harlem at a very young age and began a cabaret act that involved a huge amount of drag performance. But not only. For example, this is her number from, this is her famous banana dress that she wore. She took this act to Paris. She wanted to go to Paris because she said America was too racist and she never wanted to go back. She vowed never to go back, and she spent that time dating Frida Kahlo and working for the French resistance. As you can see, drag remained an important component of her act through the rest of her life. While Baker was sort of planning her escape from America, at the same time, Marlene Dietrich was planning her escape to America. And she had a very specific plan to do it. And that plan is the movie you're watching tonight, Blue Angel, with her, I guess you could call her collaborator, Joseph von Sternberg. The von is completely fake. He sort of packaged himself as some kind of German aristocrat, which he absolutely wasn't. But they knew that this film was their key to getting out of Germany, which is why, among other things, the film was simultaneously made in German and English. You are watching the superior German version of it tonight because they all knew what they were saying. But I just want to show you what it looks like in English. I promise the resolution will be better tonight for your screen. Amanda, did you think of me when you saw this? When you saw that guy? Yeah, that's... Gotta hold on to my hair. So Dietrich's character in the film is basically, she was living the same life as Dietrich herself. Dietrich was born to an aristocratic German family, but the second son of an aristocratic German family, who immediately went into the army, and like most of German males in that period died in World War I. It left the family penniless, and Dietrich sort of ambled vaguely downwards towards a cabaret career. In the 1920s into the 30s, she was performing at clubs like the Silhouette or the El Dorado. This is the Weimar period in German history, sort of economically depressed but culturally vibrant period, incredibly queer and inclusive, as you can see, very affirming, surprisingly, shockingly affirming, actually. For example, that's Miss El Dorado from the El Dorado Club. This is a publication from the same period. As you can see, the date on the top is December 1930. It gives you some sense of what this period was like in Germany. And one component of it was the Weimar cinema. One element of which you are watching tonight, The Blue Angel. Another would have been the work of Fritz Lang, Metropolis, and Victor Victoria. Many people don't realize is actually a remake of a Weimar film about a woman pretending to be a man, pretending to be a woman, etc. I just want to show, even if you don't know anything about Weimar, if you've seen this film, you probably know a lot about it, because Fosseisms aside, this is basically what Dietrich's life was like. Cabaret is, of course, based on the diary work of Christopher Isherwood, living in Berlin as the Nazis were coming into power. If you know how this film ends, you kind of know how the Weimar period ends. A lot of people have seen this image before of the Nazis burning books. Where they burn books, they will soon burn people. What you may not know is what books those are. The books being burned at this rally were the work of Magnus Hirschfeld, who ran the Institute for Sexual Research. That's Hirschfeld on the right. You can see him there with the rest of the Institute, along with his partner there. The Institute was sort of shockingly progressive. Hirschfeld gets called the father of modern sexual liberation, and destroying his work was vital to the Nazis, and it was quite total, actually. A lot of people, whenever you see some horrible person saying that this trans thing is so new, one of the reasons they're able to say this trans thing is so new is because that history was systematically destroyed. This is a clip from the celluloid closet about the work that Dietrich continued to do once she arrived in Hollywood.
The audience laughs.
That's Quentin Crisp. I love him.
When a woman dresses as a man, nobody laughs.
Yeah.
They just thought she looked wonderful.
Morocco, again, von Sternberg, which you are also screening, I believe. Opposite Gary Cooper, with whom she had a relationship.
I saw Marlene Dietrich in Morocco when I was a teenager. I just was flipping the channels and saw her and decided to settle in for an old movie. And there's this scene where she comes into a nightclub and she's just stunning in this tuxedo.
May I have this? Of course.
And the camera lingers. I mean, it wasn't like I was catching this out of the side of the screen. It's right in the center. She has a romance with Gary Cooper in this movie, but that romance just went right out the window for me. I was just like, who was that woman? What had happened? I started writing a whole other script for what was really going on.
It's kind of what Dietrich was like herself, actually, for poor Gary Cooper. She cheated on him quite a lot. She's very frank in her diaries, which are amazing. If you get a chance to read them, please do. From a very early age, like 14 years old, she starts talking about her crushes on girls. Very openly bisexual. Her in Hollywood, to say that someone was part of Marlene Dietrich's sewing circle was code for saying that they were queer. She retained her hatred for the Nazis when she arrived in America. As soon as the war broke out, she immediately hatched a plot to murder Hitler. She tried to figure out how she could seduce him and then kill him, but how she could keep, for example, she was trying to design a special hat pin she could use to murder the Fuhrer. Gary Cooper tried to talk her out of it, but she toured with the USO. That's her on the right meeting General Patton, who gave her a pistol in case she ever did meet the Fuhrer. If you've seen Inglourious Bastards, you've seen a fictionalized version of her. Tarantino has talked about how Dietrich was one of the influences for Bridget von Hammersmark in the film, sort of plotting to murder Hitler. And she played the same game in real life that this character does, where she would try to convince, because she was a very valuable piece of propaganda, right? If the Germans could get her back, they could indicate there was something superior about the Nazi cause. So she would say, oh yeah, I'd love to. Can I just meet Hitler for a minute? Like, she also recorded propaganda music, the track Lily Marlene. If you ever get a chance to listen to it, it's a German song that was banned by the Nazis because it was, of course, Marlene Dietrich singing it. But it was so popular, there was nothing they could do. You could hear it playing on records in the trenches. When she came back, however, she was persona non grata in Hollywood. There's a fictionalized version of her, this part of her career in American Horror Story by Jessica Lange, where she basically toured the country doing a raggedy cabaret act.
And you pick up those drumsticks and start banging. Schnell!
I just love this.
A god-awful small affair to the girl with the mousy hair, but her mommy is yelling no. And
she was it was difficult to cast her, obviously. Americans don't want to see Germans after the Second World War. She had sort of aged out of being a starlet. It was a concern, even in the film you're watching tonight, Blue Angel, there was already talk about her possibly being too old. So she basically went from whatever job she could get. Orson Welles gives her a job in Touch of Evil, for example. That little number at the end, towards the end of American Horror Story season, where she's performing Bowie, is almost certainly a nod to her last film performance, which was in David Bowie's Just a Gigolo, a terrible film. He only did it because they promised he would meet Marlene Dietrich, which he didn't even get to do. If you ever watch the film, their scenes are cut together. She filmed all her scenes in Paris. She lived several more decades after this film was shot, but she purposely retired from public life because she didn't want to damage the image of glamour that she had created. Bowie was obsessed. He took pictures of Dietrich to the Hunky Dory photo shoot and tried to recreate them. And she sort of retired and became a camp icon even while still alive. One of the drag children I think she inspired is Stormé de Laverie, the drag performer who threw the first punch at Stonewall. Stormé was hauled out of the club, mistaken for a man by one of the police, and hauled back and punched him in the face. Their fight apparently lasted for 10 minutes, during which Marsha P. Johnson picked up a brick and threw it at the police and began what Stormé insisted on never calling a riot, but a revolution. What I love about Dietrich is she basically, because she was a drag performer who functionally became famous in their own right, it means every gender can kind of dress in drag as Marlene Dietrich. And because she had sort of kicked the door open for menswear, not just for celebrities, but for example, these are the Teddy Girls. Maybe you've never heard of them. They were basically a girl gang that wandered around London after the bombings. They're sort of pre-mod, and they dressed in this great androgynous style. I just love them in the middle of the rubble there. The remake that I mentioned of Victor Victoria, starring Julie Andrews, where she then, after that, for the rest of her career, has spent dressing in drag. The 80s saw a moment, again, sort of these moments where queer culture are suppressed. You get these flashpoints of androgyny as icon. Annie Lennox, Princess Di, looking great. I'm not sure about the green vest, but obviously Diane Keaton. And maybe her biggest fan, a one-sided relationship, I'm afraid to tell you, Madonna. Madonna idolized Dietrich considerably, spent quite a few years emulating her to the point of obsession. I had to cut a clip where Madonna sings Like a Virgin in a tux with a terrible German accent. If you think her English accent is bad, you should see her German one. Unfortunately, it was one-sided. Dietrich is on the record as saying, "I played trash, she was trash." But alas. This sort of queer campiness continues into the highbrow, Fassbinder's Lola, which I understand just screened. is obviously, even just looking at it, you can see the echoes of Dietrich, and particularly the film you're about to see. I wanted to show you a lowbrow version of it, but unfortunately, I'm told the clip is not working. I will tweet about it, I promise. I will send you the clip via Twitter. But Blonde Venus, Dietrich's role, has a scene opposite Cary Grant here where she strips out of a gorilla costume. It is shot for shot recreated in 1997's Batman and Robin, made by Joel Schumacher, including the pink gorilla suit. A friend of mine, Baby Bell Bell, does a number where you can see the pink gorilla suit there. Uma Thurman, who looks sort of shockingly when you watch the clip like Marlene Dietrich, strips out of this gorilla suit and hypnotizes Batman and Robin. It's a really great film. They should show it here. And it's this element that fascinates me, not just the suits, but the way she can be this sort of high glam camp icon. This is, for example, a shoot of a performer named Quince, who doesn't lip sync to Marlene, he sings it. And it's by the very famous gay photographers Pierre et Gilles.
Next up,
and of course there's this.
Legendary Marlene Dietrich is here!
Thank you so much for having me, RuPaul, on your drag race. I see you're also wearing a suit.
I'm wearing a suit.
You know, when I wear a suit, people say, Marlene, are you a lesbian? And I look at them and I say, yes.
Marlene Dietrich!
As a point of principle, I make sure that every homosexual pussy that I meet receives a Marlene signed photograph.
Not a match, Candace, I'm afraid.
I'd love to give Fräulein Candice Kane a signed photograph. I promise that Teutonic bisexuals make the most forceful and unforgettable lovers.
Let's go to Marlene Dietrich.
Well, I found this question kind of unfair because, as you know, I rarely know these new things. I rarely leave my house.
No.
And I died many decades ago.
You did. This is going somewhere, I can tell. Yeah.
So I wrote Tomaten, Kartoffeln und Sauerkraut.
That's not a match, but a very, very good answer. And a long way to go for an answer. I love it.
As I said, I mean, Sasha Velour, if you're not a Drag Race fan, is sort of famously a cerebral queen. And her obsession with Dietrich, I think, is useful. For example, when Google was celebrating Dietrich's birthday, they asked Sasha Velour to do the Google Doodle for it. This is her work. So why is Dietrich back in such a major way? Well, I mean, obviously the suits are gorgeous. I just want to point out, next time you see a woman in a suit in a magazine, 9 times out of 10, I bet you it's in black and white. I didn't alter any of these. This is like a thing that happens because we want to recall it's not just about the androgyny, but it's recalling that specific moment. Now, where is this echoing now? Well, Tessa Thompson in Men in Black, I'm super excited about. Lena Waithe at the Met Gala. But the piece that really brings this together for me and helps me explain why Dietrich is still important is Janelle Monáe. Janelle Monáe is on record talking about how important Dietrich's work is, but it's not just the suits. If you know Monet's work, she's obsessed not just with Dietrich, but the Weimar period in general. This, for example, is the cover of her album, and that's the poster for Metropolis. The references are quite explicit. It's actually a concept album about a group of freaks and weirdos and robots being suppressed. And I think that's why Dietrich is back. The other day, this is why I told you about Glad Day. The other day, John Tory came in for Mother's Day for drag brunch. Obviously a photo op. I mean, he means well, whatever. He has me blocked on Twitter. I'm not going to take it personally. Not a big deal. But this visit went massively viral with the alt-right community. Our local neo-Nazi Faith Goldie, local neo-Nazi John Kay, all of them were tweeting and retweeting complaints about this visit by the mayor. As social media guy, it was my job to absorb them. All well and good, except then we received a package. I should warn you before I show this next image of the package. I have blurred some of the more offensive bits of it, but it's still pretty gross. This is the packet that we received in the mail. This is one page from it. As you can see, it's stapled. It was quite large. And receiving this, as soon as this fluttered open, I was like, oh, I know why Dietrich still matters. Dietrich still matters because she saw the world turning against her. She saw a world that was not getting better, that was visibly getting worse. And it is the world that I see. I'm 35, and it's the first time as a queer person in the city where it feels less safe than it did last year. Bruce MacArthur is in jail, but Bruce MacArthur didn't kill Tess Ritchie or Laura Wells. Bruce MacArthur didn't institute the blood ban. He didn't take queer education out of schools. The climate is changing, and Dietrich, feeling the climate changing around her, not only refused to stop being weird, but turned her weirdness into the weapon that she would use against that world. She lived in defiance, and that to me is what work Dietrich as icon still does. I just want to leave you with Jinx Monsoon singing the song, I guess now we'd call it the hit single from the film you're watching tonight. Thank you so much. Please live in defiance.
Oh, falling in love again. I never wanted to. Tuition reimbursement. What am I to do? Can't help it. Falling in love again. I never wanted to. What am I to do? Can't help it. Ow! I love you, Jinx! Man, spielen mich wie Motten das Lied. Und wenn sie verbrennen, ja, da kann ich nicht. Ich bin von Kopf bis Fuß, everybody. Ich liebe eingestellt. Denn das ist meine Welt.
Thank you so much. Enjoy the film. See the rest of the series. Have a good evening.